Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Tender Parts, a guide to healing from trauma through internal family systems therapy, by Ilyse Kennedy, LPC, LMFT, PMHC. Narrated by Wendy Tremont King. Publisher's note: this audiobook includes bonus material. Please visit Tantor.com and type "The Tender Parts" into the search box. Follow the link to the book's page. Then, under the Supplemental Content section, please enter the access code MEND, and then click the Unlock button to access the bonus material. The code should be entered in all lowercase letters. All illustrations referenced in this audiobook can be found in the bonus material. Introduction. At age 22, I was surprised to find myself sitting on a turquoise couch in a therapist's office in Los Angeles. I say that with surprise because I can't recall what finally made me book the appointment. Perhaps it was the recognition that existing felt excruciating, but I didn't know any different. Perhaps it was the tumultuous relationship I was in. Perhaps it was the terror I experienced each time I left the house. I had driven by the sign for that therapy office each day on the way home from a job that I often left exhausted and in tears. The sign for the office was easy to spot, just above a wine bar on Sunset Boulevard. As I sat across from my new therapist, Sarah, my story came flooding out of me. After I finished speaking, Sarah looked at me tender-heartedly and said, "Of course you've been having a hard time. You experienced immense trauma." For a long time, I had become the bad things that happened to me. But when Sarah termed my experience as trauma, I felt like I could finally take ownership over the reality that these bad things had happened to me. While it changed the course of my healing to take this ownership, the acknowledgement and realization alone wasn't enough to change my day-to-day struggles. Following the initial recognition of trauma, Sarah took the treatment on from all angles. She recommended some books that I might find useful, but I did little more than press "Buy Now" on Amazon. My anxiety wouldn't allow me the space to look inside. She also suggested diagnoses such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but didn't help me understand what they meant. She countered my self-deprecating and shaming thoughts with positive reframes, but I wasn't able to take them in. Despite the extent of treatment options provided, nothing Sarah tried seemed to truly affect me. I felt her hopelessness in my treatment, that even she didn't know how to help me. Although I desperately wanted to be better, I didn't know how better would happen for me, or even what it would feel like. 10 years later, I am now sitting in the therapist chair rather than on a turquoise couch. In my work as a therapist, I aim to offer clients an understanding of trauma and help them resolve their trauma through deepening their understanding of themselves. That's because in a culture saturated with toxic positivity, we get messages that make real and lasting change seem as easy as choose joy or let go. I felt this in my interactions with Sarah. This desire to be positive is well-intentioned, but it negates everything that makes up our personhood. It disavows our cultural background, the relationships that have shaped us, and the traumas we have endured. Instead of holding the belief that humans are simplistic creatures who can shift their mood or perspective on a dime? What if we consider the complexities of our internal makeup? What if we recognize that we are not a single thing, but instead made of many internal parts, who, with each facet of life we have endured, have learned to do different jobs in order to keep us safe and fully functioning? Internal Family Systems Therapy, IFS, developed by Richard C. Schwartz, does just that. IFS maintains that we are born with a core self, but that in response to each event we endure, our system becomes fragmented, and we form a variety of parts within us that aid in our functioning. If we look deeply enough, we can get to know these parts. Just as IFS introduces the idea of parts, it also maintains that we all have access to wholeness in the form of self-energy, a feeling of being centered, like an energy well that offers parts access to compassion, understanding, and trust. By expanding self-energy, we expand our capacity to understand and rationally respond to what is happening inside ourselves and others. When I first heard about the concept of IFS in my graduate studies, I felt so much relief. I felt this not just for future clients, whom I would have the privilege of sharing this framework for trauma recovery, but also for myself. I had spent so much time trying to change my thought patterns with little success. So much time perceiving myself in black and white. When I considered instead that I held various parts within me, parts that had formed in response to the things that happened to me, I could hold compassion and make more space for all of me. My own journey of getting to know my parts began that day. As you get to know your own parts through this book, I will join you on this journey by introducing you to mine. There is a vacationing part of me, floating on the ocean in Cape Cod. She shows up in whispers, usually when I see no blank spaces in my schedule. She sips a margarita there in the middle of the ocean, as if Jimmy Buffett himself placed it in her saltwater pruned hands, letting me know I need a vacation. There is a people-pleasing part of me who can't say no. She shows up as soon as anyone makes a request of me. Of course, she says, before a conscious thought steps in to say, you don't have the mental capacity to do that right now. There is a part of me stuck beneath a Mickey Mouse blanket on her parents' couch. She is 17 and frozen. She worries if she lifts the blanket, her body will once again no longer be her own. There is a part of me who is 22. I can feel a churning in my stomach and a sinking sensation in the center of my chest that lets me know she's awakened. She holds the word trauma tightly in her hands and on her heart. The word feels like her permission, allowing her to acknowledge the weight of her experience, and sometimes her shield, protecting her from the burdens of the outside world. She stands on the edge of a black hole. She walks closer to it, peering over the edge. Another part comes in to block her before she gets too close. Perhaps inside you, there also lives a carefree tourist, reminding you to pause before you burn out. Perhaps there is a people-pleaser, afraid to say no for fear that you'll be hurt once again. Perhaps there is a teenager, perpetually stuck in the trauma they endured. And maybe there is a part who holds the labeled trauma victim firmly in their hands, and the statement, "I am bad," tightly around their heart. Whatever the reason this book has found itself with you, I want you to know, dear listener, that this book is a journey. In the therapy room, it is my goal to ensure clients feel my presence with them. While we are not physically together, I want you to know that I am accompanying you in what lies ahead. You will get to know my voice and my presence. Think of me as your caring other. If the work or concepts in this book begin to feel too big or too much, it is okay to stop the book. It is okay to return to it later or to forego the book altogether. Throughout this book, I will offer you periodic reminders and space to check in with yourself and your system. Whom this book is for. This book is for 22-year-old me, who tried over and over again to write her trauma narrative while she was still stuck in it, who was given the word trauma with little direction of how to heal it. This book is for other survivors who hold the same word close, but don't know where to go from there. This book is for those looking for a framework to support and understand a loved one who is a trauma survivor. This book is for clinicians, the sacred story keepers, seeking to understand and aid trauma survivors from an affirming and sensitive lens. This book is for those holding the sacred stories of others in addition to their own. Through this book, you will understand more about trauma through an IFS lens and get to know the makeup of your own system through information, exercises, and reflections. As you begin this work, I offer you my full self-energy. As I write these words, I feel it ignite in the center of my chest, a glow illuminating around my heart. The 22-year-old is tucked away in her bed, and I have planned to check in with her later. The 17-year-old is safe in her room, being serenaded by Justin Timberlake through a set of headphones. The people-pleaser has made it clear and asked me to let you know that she hopes you enjoy this book, but she'll be relaxing with the vacationing part in Cape Cod, holding a cold margarita, but not taking a sip. With my parts to the side and my self-energy illuminating from my heart to yours, we begin. 1. Am I not whole? There is a part of me who struggles with beginnings, who couldn't get the first sentence of this book down on paper. I feel frustration toward this part of me. It first showed up as a pull in my chest that stopped my breath. The pull turned soon to a sensation of stuckness. When I close my eyes and check in with this part, it feels familiar. I ask it if there is anything it wants me to know. It shows me an image of my high school history teacher, smiling. A teacher so beloved by students, but who didn't care for me. The image becomes clearer as I focus on the stuck sensation and image at the same time. I see 15-year-old me reflected back in his glasses. I feel shame rise from this part and from this younger version of myself. I feel her with us now, though the initial part is protecting her. The sensation of stuckness sinks into my stomach, as if quicksand is slowly pulling this part and this younger me down. As I notice the shame and the viscous sensation of the dragging sand, I begin to feel differently toward this part. It's as if compassion is breaking through, like sunlight coming through the clouds. I ask the part, how would you feel about not having to do your job anymore? The stuckness firms, and I feel an answer come to me. I'm afraid we would fail, the part replies. I begin to feel sadness toward this part. I check in with it to see if it can feel my presence. It can. I let it know I'm feeling sad toward it. It's able to take in the sadness without taking it on. The stuckness in my chest loosens as the part comes closer to me. I let it know, I understand you're protecting the young one. It feels understood and comes closer. As humans, we are born whole. Our nervous systems are perfectly built to receive connection and safety from those around us. We come into the world seeking an experience of safety and believe those around us will provide that by meeting our needs, until we learn otherwise. With each need met as an infant, a cry that is comforted by the warmth of a loving other, one that is met with milk, and another that is soothed with a gentle rock to sleep, our safety is affirmed. However, when enough of our needs are not met, we begin to develop adaptations either to get our needs met or to suppress them. Even with our extremely limited experience of the world at this age, our tiny nervous systems begin to internalize and differentiate what keeps us safe from what causes danger. Perhaps we learn to smile and coo to get our caregivers to engage because they don't respond to our cries. Or maybe our caregivers are unpredictable in their response to us, so we approach them with hesitation, not knowing whether to allow ourselves to take in safety or put up a wall to block unpredictability. In some cases, we may learn to suppress our own needs, such as dimming hunger and bathroom cues, because we come to expect that these needs won't be met. As we take in information and learn about the world from these relational and environmental cues, our brains begin to form patterns of relating that become known as our states of mind. Our earliest brain states form in response to the experiences we have with our caregivers, but they dictate how we interact with the world going forward, even into adulthood. In other words, we learn how to interact based on the ways our needs were met or not met, and how our interactions were received. In IFS, these brain states reflect the adaptations that we call parts. These parts feel like entities within us, each holding their own emotions, sensations, memories, behaviors, roles, or jobs. With each new tribulation we endure, these parts form within us to help us cope and better respond to similar situations in the future. These parts take on different jobs within our system and carry burdens in response to the hardships we have experienced. For example, we might develop a people-pleasing part in response to our needs not being met in infancy. We might develop a depressed part who helps to numb our emotions. Or we might develop a rage part who believes it is protecting us from being hurt. These parts each serve a purpose, so no part is considered good or bad. However, our tendency is to look away from the parts of us that we believe are bad, wrong, or unhelpful in some way. Many of us hold the belief that if we look away from something, it keeps it at bay. But what we actually find is if we ignore our parts, they try harder to be heard and come on stronger. In contrast, when we pause and get to know them, they tend to soften and feel more in control. As you learn more about IFS in this book, you'll get to know your own parts. If this concept of parts is still hard to envision right now, think of the Pixar movie Inside Out. In this movie, a young girl named Riley navigates the stressors of starting at a new middle school after she moves across the country with her family. Rather than making Riley the focus of the movie, we meet her emotions who are aptly named joy, sadness, anger, disgust, and fear. In the movie, these emotions appear as physical entities, and they function as characters with their own roles, emotions, beliefs, and interactions with others. This is often how parts show up, too. As with Inside Out, the multiplicity of parts within us can represent different emotions, adaptations, body sensations, past versions of ourselves, roles, or facets of our personality. In addition, parts can reflect the concept of internalized others, in which the parts that live within us represent people from the outside world whom we have internalized, rather than as adaptations. These outside people can reflect others who have been loving to us or people who have hurt us. Daniel Siegel calls this concept MWe, the internalizing of me plus we, in relation to states of mind. When we internalize others, who aid us in organizing our internal world, it helps us form coherent states of mind. But when we internalize others who feel chaotic or disorganized, it leads our states of mind into a place of chaos, and we develop even more parts to help us organize back to a place of coherence. If this is your first time learning about IFS, the concept of parts may feel foreign to you because it does not represent the way you think about the human experience or your own internal experience. With time, it may feel more comforting and settle in your own system with ease. Reflection. I invite you to take a moment to pause. Notice your breath. Are any sensations arising in your body? How is the concept of parts sitting with you so far? Does it feel welcoming or foreign? Does it feel relieving to take in? Or do you notice some resistance? Do you feel yourself orienting to the idea, or is confusion arising? If you notice resistance or confusion, this is okay. Acknowledge where it is showing up in or around your body. Is there anything it might need from you in order to ease? As a trauma survivor, learning about IFS felt like a huge relief for my own system. My trauma brain had adapted to think in black and white, as if I was either in danger or safe. My internal alarm was sounding off and launching me into a trauma response, or I was completely at rest. A part of me might even call that version lazy. It felt like I was constantly lingering somewhere between anxiety and depression, the bookends of my threat responses. My life felt chaotic, with no reprieve, and those around me also felt my chaos. Between the parts of me that were numbed with alcohol at night and the parts that felt terrified during the day, I clung to my partner for a sense of stability and calm that my own system struggled to provide me with. At that time, I didn't have the language of parts. I would think to myself, I am chaotic. But when I found the language and began to adjust how I spoke about myself and to myself, I became softer and more compassionate toward my parts. When I shifted to using IFS language, I am chaotic transformed into a part of me is chaotic, or even the 22-year-old has a part that is chaotic. Making this simple shift in language represents a huge change from traditional psychotherapy approaches that seek to find the problem and determine a solution or treatment path. Within IFS, instead of viewing behaviors and symptoms as disorders, we view different parts of ourselves as adaptations that arose in response to difficult circumstances. When we examine mental health struggles from this trauma-informed lens, we can understand the why behind the behaviors. As a therapist, IFS allows me to trust that the folks I work with already have what they need within them to heal. As a client, and someone who uses IFS for herself, it allows me to trust myself in my own healing. Reflection. What old messages do you carry that can be shifted to parts language? Think of a negative or painful message you hold about yourself. Notice how it feels when you state this message as if it is a fact, such as, "I always make mistakes." Notice how it feels when you shift this to parts language. "A part of me makes mistakes," or "A part of me believes I always make mistakes." Exercise. Parts circular timeline. In IFS, we acknowledge that we each inherently possess self-energy. But in response to difficult events or interactions with others, parts form and begin to do certain jobs within the system. Parts form like shells around our self-energy, blocking us from accessing it. In order to get to know some of your parts, I invite you to fill in these circles, which are depicted in the accompanying bonus PDF, with pivotal events that have occurred in your life, including an approximate age at which the event transpired, and a description of the parts that developed in response. For example, perhaps at age 5, your parents went through a separation that caused an anxiety part to develop. Or maybe at age 12, a people-pleasing part formed when you started at a new school. This exercise will allow you to get to know your system and develop more awareness around which parts protect it. Trauma and IFS. Though we are just beginning, we have already touched lightly on the concept of trauma. Before moving further, I want to share more about the definition of trauma and its relation to IFS. When people initially think about trauma, they often imagine a frightening or life-threatening event. Perhaps the word brings to mind a car accident, an assault, or a natural disaster. While these events can certainly lead to trauma, it is not the event itself that defines trauma. Rather, trauma is a physiological response to any threat or distress, whether perceived or real. When we perceive something in our environment as threatening, the amygdala, which we can think of as the brain's alarm bell, sends a signal for the nervous system to launch into a threat response. This threat response is intended to aid in our survival and can involve moving into one of 4 different reactionary modes: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. In fight mode, we attempt to ward off the threat by facing it head-on and fighting back. This reactionary mode represents a state of mobilization where we are energized to take action. However, if the threat seems too overwhelming, we can move into the flight response instead, in which we attempt to run away from or escape the perceived threat. Both fight and flight reflect a state of nervous system hyperarousal, in which our bodies are filled with adrenaline and cortisol, propelling us toward action. However, our threat response system can also move us into a state of hypoarousal, in which the nervous system slows us down rather than energizes us. Our bodily functions shut down as we move toward a state of immobilization, often with no access to speech or cognitive function. This is known as the freeze response.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?